Okay, so what is design thinking? Design thinking is a problem solving methodology that finds most of its value when dealing with problems that don't yet have a clear path to a solution. It's most valuable when you want to revolutionize or change the game in whatever space that you're working in. If you look up design thinking, you'll most likely see a bunch of diagrams that list out steps. And the most common verbiage in those steps are empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. So I'll use that same language to break it all down in this video. The most common first step in design thinking is empathize, which really means to understand who you're trying to solve the problems for and what their problems actually are. At this point, you don't yet know what problems you're going to solve specifically, and the key to being successful here is having strong interviewers conducting the interviews. The best interviewers in this space tend to be closer to like counselors or therapists because they need to be able to get people to really open up, to really get to the root cause of their frustrations and or needs. Failure to do a good job here will lead to less valuable ideas down the line. A good example might be a design firm that's hired to help a grocery store make an experience better for its shoppers. If I was one of the shoppers interviewed, they learned that I shop in much the same way that I like to live my life. I decide on the key, most important things that I need to happen and just kind of wing the rest and see what happens. When I shop, I usually create a list of necessities that I'm out of, like salt, eggs, rice, toothpaste, the types of things that I just always have around the house. And then once I'm in the store, I like to get inspired by something I see and kind of decide my meals for the week. I like to buy food in ways that I can kind of eat for a few days. For example, Mexican food, if you have, most of the main parts like meat, beans, cheese, tomatoes, onions, peppers, cilantro, and, the rest, you can eat it for a few days and you can even create variation in them by like doing things like tacos and burritos and bowls, etc. As a shopper, I usually have two primary frustrations. I would say that one is that, usually when I create my list, even though I use an app, a note taking app, I usually just list them out in the order that I think them. Which means when I get to the store, I have to kind of group them in my head based off of department, and they're not always right next to each other on the list. So I try to group them so I can grab everything in an area before I move on to the next area. And that works pretty well most of the time, but eventually there's those times where you have to go all the way back to the other side of the store because you forgot to get something, or you forgot that something was also closer to that department as well. My other frustration to my shopping style is that because I usually wait to get inspired by something at the store, then I also have to think of all the different things that I'll need to buy for whatever my new inspiration is, which also leads to just like a lot of chaotic zigzagging around the store and a lot of back and forth. Okay, so now that you understand the kind of crazy that I am, it's time to define the problem you want to solve. Now, normally you'd have information from more than just one person, and you'd try to find common themes. You would aim for something that would give a high return on investment, something that would set you apart and really take you to the next level in whatever space that you're working in. In my example, you might even create a persona for me and say you're going to create a better shopping experience for the wing it shopper who likes to be inspired in the store. Next up is ideating, or coming up with different ways to solve the problem or problems you've chosen to tackle. You're going to do a lot of brainstorming and fleshing out ideas here, and the goal is to come up with a bunch of viable ideas. You'll need a good facilitator here, the type of person who can embolden quiet or shy people to generate a bunch of ideas, and also able to kind of tame more aggressive personalities so they don't like overshadow the group. You'll also need a diverse group of people to come with a diverse group of people with different backgrounds, so you're coming up with different ideas from different ways of thinking. Most people, when they're trying to come up with ideas, kind of stop at the first good idea. The challenge here is to not do that. I remember in my master's program for user experience design, we were challenged to come up with a personal problem from our own lives to solve, and then come up with 3 great ideas to solve it. After we turned in those 3 ideas, they were like, okay, now come up with 10 new, different, unique ideas to solve that same problem. And what ends up happening is you start coming up with maybe silly or more outrageous ideas, but those outrageous ideas might just spark new ideas for yourself or someone else that can be combined with another idea that might even make it less outrageous. In my shopping example, some ideas might be like apps to map out your list, ability to scan items and see like images of different dishes you can make with it. Maybe an automatic ingredient generation list, also divided by department. Maybe the whole experience can happen on a kiosk, and the items are brought to you. Maybe smart shopping carts. Maybe you can make the entire store a circle instead of a rectangular grid, so that way you're never really that far from anything. And I'm sure there's many other ideas and routes you can go, but I'm not going to try to come up with 10 right here on the spot. Then it's time to prototype. You should be prepared to make many inexpensive prototypes and then learn from them. It could be a cardboard kiosk, sketches of mobile app screens, models of stores, whatever. Now you've made it to the testing step for your prototypes. One of the hardest parts of this step is being willing to kind of scrap ideas, but it's also one of the most important. You have to consider any type of prototype you make only a learning opportunity so you can make the next better thing. One of my favorite exercises that's been used on me and that I've also used a few times is having a quick contest before you get to the prototyping phase, to kind of like get people's minds opened up to building and kind of relax them from the training and say, hey, let's have a quick contest, usually something simple like paper airplanes, and see who could build the plane that can go the furthest. You give them, a few minutes to create their airplane. Most people don't take more than 5 minutes to create a paper airplane. And then before any of the contest begins, or before you even let them throw their planes to test them out, you tell them to crumple it up. Just crumple it all up and throw it away. This is usually met with an utter look of betrayal from your participants as they reluctantly crumple up those masterpieces that they just made. But this is a great way to get people kind of emotionally ready for prototyping and testing. And it's also funny to do. There's no set number of cycles of generating ideas, prototyping, testing, getting new ideas, and kind of going through that over and over and over again. However, the more time you put into it and going through those cycles, the better the final outcome is likely to be. So just to sum that all up, design thinking is a methodology that first seeks out to understand who you want to solve your problem for and what your problems actually are. Then to define and decide which of these problems is most valuable to solve, and then to just get into that cycle of creating and learning and creating and learning, and so you can finally end up on a great design. Having a team committed to performing each step with passion and truly believing that it will result in a positive outcome is pretty important to making sure the whole concept is a success. I hope you found that educational. If you have any additional questions or comments, let me know in the comments and I'll answer you there, or I'll create a whole new video to answer your questions. So as always, subscribe to see those questions get answered, and thanks for watching.